So let's look at some design problems. The first one is a small building and it's got only one MDF and no IDFs, and all the access points are within 300 feet of the MDF. So what do? You run all your Ethernet cable back to the MDF and your switch goes there, and that's very easy. So this is our MDF, we've got our switch, and we've got our access points scattered throughout the building, and we just run them back to the MDF. So very, very easy. Now, what if it's a big building? Medium-sized building, we've got an MDF, we've got some IDFs, and probably, one or more. This building might have 3 or 5 IDFs. 2 or 5, depending on how they've designed it. Not too big of a deal. Again, you run your Ethernet cable to the nearest IDF or MDF, assuming all the access points are within 300 feet. And then we install switches in the IDFs and the MDFs, and we trunk all the switches back from the IDFs to the MDF. And I want to say that it's not as easy as you think, because we do have to think about the type of switches that we're buying and make sure that they have enough capacity to handle the traffic. But again, say we've got our first floor and we've got our second floor, and we've got our MDF with our switch, and we got our IDF. It's got a whole bunch of switches on our first floor, and on our second floor we've got a bunch of IDFs, and each IDF has a switch and it has access points connected to it, and we just trunk all these IDFs back to our main room. You can see in our main room we've installed a much bigger switch to handle all the traffic from our IDFs. So this is another scenario. So what if we've got a more complicated situation? We need Wi-Fi in this football stadium, or a very large building, a warehouse, a stadium. It's got MDFs, it's got IDFs, but our access points are more than 300 feet from an IDF or MDF. So how do we build this building? Well, we need to how do we design this Wi-Fi for this building? Well, we need to consider moving an access point to within 300 feet of an IDF, and then installing antennas or repeaters. That's the only way to ensure coverage. So let's look at this in more detail. Let's say we've got our IDF or MDF down here in the corner, and this is we can say 300 feet, so that's a maximum distance we can install an access point. So if we put an access point here, this green circle is a coverage area of that cell, and that's pretty much all the coverage we can get. So we had some overlapping access points here and here, and now we've covered this area with Wi-Fi. But what about here? Where's our Wi-Fi here? What do we do? Well, in our first solution, we build an IDF right here, and we add some more access points within 300 feet of the IDF, and now we've been able to cover everything. And of course, access points connect to the respective IDF or MDF, and the distance here doesn't matter between the two. We just trunk them with a fiber optic cable and we're good to go. Of course, The other option is, let's say we couldn't build a IDF out here, then we just add a repeater, and the repeater picks up the signal, and the repeater has a coverage area. Or we can add an amplifier to our access point and then add an antenna, and an antenna has a coverage area. It's much larger, and now we don't need to build an IDF. That's another option. So you need to consider, if you're building an IDF, then you need a rack, you need a switch, you need a UPS, patch panel, power outlets. Yeah, for security, yeah, get a separate room or a cabinet that locks. It's pretty easy to break a cabinet though, but so obviously you have to make do with what you have. So you may not be able to find a separate dedicated room to stick your IDF in. But think about, exposure to dust, water. There's adequate ventilation and physical security. And then able to run a connection from the IDF to another IDF or to the MDF. And fiber is preferred, I always say. And then we have a much bigger scenario, which is like a university campus or a corporate campus. So we've got many buildings, and they have many floors and many IDFs. And if you think it's hard, well, think of it one building at a time. Think about how you're going to connect the buildings together after. And usually, for the most part, in a campus, there are tunnels and conduits that connect all the buildings together. A lot of times, a campus will have a heating plant or a cooling plant, and so there are already mechanisms in place to supply the other buildings with electricity, steam, phone lines, and so they're already well connected. So if we look at this scenario in more detail, we've got our core switch in our main building, and we've got several other buildings, and they've each got their own, connection, and we just trunk them all together. Obviously, this is an extremely simplified system. If you were a Cisco certified architect, you could come up with a more detailed plan. We're not going to go over every little thing, but we'd be here literally forever talking about it. By the time we finish talking about it, the technology will have changed and we have to make a whole new presentation. Just know that when you have a campus with multiple buildings, the amount of engineering work to design the network is staggering. And you need to figure out what the throughput of your WAN is or your LAN is before you do any work, because especially if you don't have Wi-Fi or you don't have very good Wi-Fi, and then you drastically increase the coverage, and you've got a lot of foot traffic, you've got a lot of people walking around with laptops and smartphones, and all of a sudden they can connect to the Wi-Fi, you're going to see a staggering amount of traffic coming through, and it could cripple your network. So you need to think about that. And you can proceed building by building. Test it out a few buildings at a time, especially on a corporate campus. That can give you cost-benefit analysis or return on investment. You can take it back to the decision makers and say, hey, this is working or it's not working. We need to make some kind of changes. You can get feedback from your users early on, so you can make changes without causing too much damage. And if you think about it, every building is different. Every building serves different functions, so it may have different needs and different design. And as I said, or should have said earlier, the communication is very important. You know, on a project, especially a large project, the details will change. Costs, the type of devices, locations. Nothing is 100% predictable, especially, you know, if you're buying devices and then they get discontinued a year into the project, or something new comes out that you think your client would greatly benefit from, you need to bring that up. And you know, everybody, clients especially, they have valuable suggestions. It's important to listen to them. Their requirements might change a year into the project, or even a couple days into the project, and then you have to go back to the drawing board.